most consumed banana in the world today, and designing railway stations all over the Peak District. What a talented and productive young man. Paxton's achievements, however, did not end with the banana and the conservatory. The farce doesn't end here. What a tangled web we weave when setting out to deceive. Paxton's success with Chatsworth led him to design the infamous Crystal Palace of London, just in time for the Great Exhibition of 1851. It was originally constructed in Hyde Park for the fair. It was constructed in just over a year, an engineering feat never again repeated. It was made from more than 1,000 iron bars, and its overall mass comprised of over 4,000 tons of iron. The Chance Brothers Glassworks in Smethwick provided the 300,000 sheets of glass. Remember, this was before automatic glass manufacturing. This is the glassworks in which the glass was produced. A simple maths equation gives us an average of 822 glass panes produced every day, 7 days a week, for a year. Right here in this factory. This was Paxton's initial planned sketch for the structure. He went from this to this in a year. Furthermore, the entire Crystal Palace was able to house gigantic trees, and they had to board a lot of the glass panes up and cover a lot of the top of the structure during the World's Fair exhibition because the interior of the structure became too hot. Wouldn't Paxton, who designed the Chatsworth Conservatory, know that a huge glass palace would produce immense heat? The entire narrative soon dissolves into stupidity when we realise that a year later, in 1852, they dismantled the Crystal Palace and moved the entire structure to Sydenham in southeast London, where it was rebuilt with 2 additional huge water towers at either end of the monstrous structure. Interestingly, no photographic evidence of the original Hyde Park Palace exists. Just illustrations. Wouldn't the structure have been the focus of many photographers during the opening of the Great Exhibition of 1851, the first of its kind? It is highly likely there were either 2 of these crystal palaces in London and both destroyed, or the Hyde Park Palace is just an outright lie. Interestingly, a few years after its relocation to Sydenham, this map of the palace was produced, all designed at the hand of our genius gardener. He struggled with the water supply, we are told. After all, supplying 12,000 fountains, 2 of which shot water 250 feet into the air, and the various cascades would be a difficult task to achieve. But clearly not for Paxton. He made it happen. Interestingly, the Crystal Palace also featured one of these impossible, grand, and spectacular organs. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, while Mr. Paxton was redesigning the Crystal Palace at Sydenham, he was also designing the glorious Mentmore Towers for none other than Baron Mayer Rothschild. Who would have thought that a random, young 20-something gardener would go on to be responsible for some of the most impossible and impressive engineering feats in history? Let's also not forget about his banana. Paxton is an example of the enemy's laziness. when it comes to hiding our true history. It is not fathomable or even possible for the citizens of the 19th century to have even built these structures, let alone assign their inception to one sole man. The Crystal Palace and its gardens, just like Chatsworth, were huge farming grids that used the living water in conjunction with sound and electromagnetic energy to cultivate a whole range of wondrous produce. Kew Gardens in London is another example. The abundant electromagnetic energy was able to produce conditions of heat with ease, and the vibrational frequencies encouraged growth. Perhaps that's why Crystal Palace housed a grand organ, utilizing frequencies and vibrations to enable the growth of produce. And that's why the controllers were able to assign the cultivation of the banana, an exotic fruit, to a fabricated Englishman. The technology already established in England was able to grow many things with ease. Among other impressive horticultural achievements attributed to Paxton's genius were the perfect pineapples, another tropical fruit he grew at Chatsworth. He grew enormous lily pads, which could hold the weight of a human. He grew gigantic sequoia redwoods at Chatsworth, which usually only thrive in humid conditions. He grew them with ease, and many of these redwoods remain today, a spectacular sight to behold. It's probably worth noting that among Paxton's many other talents, Wikipedia also tells us that he became quite skilled in moving gigantic trees, as well as gigantic crystal palaces. The largest of these trees weighing 7,000 kilograms. How? With horse and cart? Why are humans so gullible? They destroyed the beautiful and impossible Chatsworth Conservatory in 1920. As the Duke's son said in a letter to his father, they blew off well over 200 pounds of explosives to tear it down, so it must have been well built. The structures of the old world were built to stand for centuries. What a great shame. The lies surrounding the Peak District do not end with Paxton. The entire national park was one gigantic interconnected electromagnetic water system of the old world. It was most likely one of Britain's primary suppliers of farming goods. The national park boasts one of the largest collections of stately homes, halls and manors, all of which would have functioned as huge farms. It was also a regional retreat that specialized in healing. Yes, that's right, healing. The Peak District is home to two large towns, Matlock and Buxton. Buxton is famous for its bottled water, and Matlock is renowned for its historical baths. Even today, both towns boast an enviable collection of old world structures. We see an abundance of old generators, domed pavilion structures, capacitors, colonnades, columns, bandstands, gardens and water systems. Overlooking the town of Matlock is Ribber Castle. Its silhouetted frame and turrets stand regal in the distance. It is a derelict structure and has been derelict for over a century. The curious public are not allowed near the structure. They tell us it was built very quickly by a Mr. John Smedley. Smedley was, we are told, an industrialist. By the 1850s, he had become the driving force behind Matlock's hydropathic industry. Hydropathy is the practice of healing and curing diseases through the use of water. The official narrative states that Smedley built Smedley's Hydro, which sits on Smedley Street in Matlock. It is now a government council building. Smedley's Hydro was just one of the hydropathies in the region. At one point, we are told, there were over 20 hydropathic establishments in the region. Just look at these structures. Smedley did not build the Hydro. Its structure, an immense water tower, evades his capabilities and the capabilities of all the 19th century citizens. The citizens of the 19th century Peak District inherited all of this infrastructure, and the controllers of our realm knew that they needed to squash any possibility of it being used for its original intended purposes, or for any of the inheritors to discover the truth. It was just too obvious, and soon someone amongst the crowd might start putting two and two together. So they did what they do best and employed a puppet. But unlike Paxton, who was able to achieve fame and fortune for taking all of the credit, Smedley had a different role to play. A role that many puppets in our society today still play. His mission was to carefully control the introduction of hydropathy, only for it to be declared primitive or fraudulent, and then subsequently buried and eradicated as a serious practice. His story is a very similar story to another enemy puppet that has gained a lot more attention over the years. I too once fell for the lies surrounding this man's story. The hydropathies were able to accommodate hundreds of patients, and they were tremendously successful in curing a whole host of diseases and issues, ranging from inflammation and bilious attacks to paralysis, rheumatism, and fevers. This was conducted through an array of different bathing techniques, applying dripping sheets as bandages, and fusing electricity, sound waves, and water. There were, as one newspaper reported, electric bells throughout the buildings. No doubt the actual potential of hydropathy was never fully expressed in Smedley's array of hydros, but they nonetheless helped people tremendously. And they were a huge success, so the controllers temporarily profited financially. The hydros healed and increased the well-being of people through water and its fusion with sound, vibration, frequency, and electricity. Look at the electric treatment menu from one of the old brochures. Options for high-powered parabolic reflector, electric ionization, and high-frequency treatment. Smedley also demonstrated the ability of etherized water to heat entire rooms in a profound way. The fernery at the Hydro had a water heating system built into its walls and always maintained a constant temperature of 65 degrees, even when the room was filled with a crowd of 350 or so visitors. The temperature never deviated. How was this kind of technology available in the 19th century, and yet today we do not have access to this kind of sophisticated heating? Historians and journalists of the time would deliberately smear Smedley, casting hydropathy as pseudoscience, comparable with homeopathy. Smedley had many battles with the burgeoning medical industry, and after his death, the hydros were purchased and the structural alterations began. Like Tesla, Smedley played his role and successfully introduced the science of the old world to have it debunked, tarnished, and sidelined forever. Hydropathy today is regarded as nothing more than a relaxing spa venture. All of its original applications of frequency and electricity have been eradicated from the practice. Smedley's role-playing allowed the controllers to justify the entire water grid system of the Peak District, successfully preventing the current 19th century and further subsequent generations from questioning its presence. The remains of the grid today are so evident. You can sit and relax to the soothing sound of water falling over the turreted regal Derwent Reservoir, which connects the entire region for its branching rivers and canals. You can stroll around shopping inside of old power stations and at old pumping stations. And in every area of the region, there are wonders waiting to be discovered. Not only in the larger towns do we find old fountains that once provided the living waters, but also in the remote villages. Tucked away, we find an old dry fountain. Look, the Lord's gift, a bittersweet joy to behold. The citizens of the old world unlocked the power of electromagnetic water by studying the stars above in the firmament. The stars above taught them that the key to manipulating the ethereal energy they harnessed from the ionosphere was through water, sound waves, vibration, and frequency. They honored this gift by constructing domes, by crafting star cities, cymatic magnetrons, and praising the Lord and Holy Spirit for the living waters they received in return. They understood the firmament as both scientists and disciples. Viewer, I am hoping the picture is starting to become clearer in your mind, and you will inevitably start to see things in a different light when pondering all of these impossible structures. It is not a coincidence that some structures like the Colosseum are also referred to as amphitheaters. Have you seen them from above? They look like speakers. Amphitheater is an interesting word. An amp is a unit of electric current, and an amplifier is a device that increases signal, especially microwaves and audio. And no doubt you will start to put two and two together in terms of some of the inventions that we were allowed to play around with before they were discarded as antique in their efficiency. But time is of the essence. We could ponder examples of the old world's electromagnetic water grid system for hours, but I encourage you to get out and hunt down these structures yourself and to document them in your own time. We have to move on. We need to start. Wait, what? You want to know if these came from the old world? Yes, they did. And they are extremely important. The inevitable ticking of the clock. A deeply unsettling instrument, but unavoidable. I need to show you one more missing piece of the electromagnetic puzzle first, and then we will take a closer look at these timekeeping instruments. Come on, let's keep moving.